Elefant, a survivor from Baratyov, Czechoslovakia. Please tell your whole story from the time the Nazis first took over your town.
Since it is over 35 years that this event took place, it's hard to recall exactly everything that took place in chronological order. I'll try as much my memory serves me to recollect events and mention them. Baratyov was a town in Slovakia, which was in previous Czechoslovakia, a democratic country, until 1938, when the Slovaks, which was a part of Czechoslovakia, asked for autonomy, and they got it in 1938 under the leadership of old Catholic priest with the name Hlinka. And after his passing, it was taken over by other Catholic priest, Dr. Tiso, who became later the president of the independent Slovakia. And the other cabinet ministers were released, from prison released old traitors of the country, of Czechoslovakia, who became the leaders of the new country. It's important to mention that the population of Slovakia was mainly Catholic. About 80% of them were Catholics. So that the influence of the president was very great on them, especially since he was a Catholic priest. On the outset, I find it also necessary to mention that only by the help of God we were saved, being a member of a family of 10, which is a miracle. It's a miracle after that tragedy that took place in Europe, and only two miraculous events, and as I said, the help of God that could happen. And I don't think anybody could claim that money, wisdom, beauty could help him. In the normal way of life, there was being professionals. I mean to say, my father being a dentist and myself too, that helped us going on from period to period. They prolonged us the permit to stay on, which I will later explain how it took place. Since Slovakia was created with the help of Nazi Germany, and they were considered one of the friendliest countries to them, events were different than in other countries. One of the things was that the government in Slovakia had their full independence. Since Germany was preparing the war against Poland, and they needed transit through Slovakia, they were mainly interested in that, and they did not bother about the Jews in the country. Baratyov was one of the cities laying near the border, near the Polish border, and before the Germans attacked Poland, they passed by and brought in many troops of every kind of military to our city and to prepare themselves for that. It was on a Friday, September 1st, 1939, that I remember, when they attacked Poland. It may be interesting to know that these German armies coming into a city with such a big Jewish population did not bother the Jews and did a lot of business with them. And since most of the Jews knew Yiddish, which is similar to German, they prefer to talk and deal with them better than with the others. It was the local Nazis that started to carry out the anti-Jewish laws more than the Germans asked them or wanted themselves. As mentioned before, the leaders from the government, like Dr. Tuka and Shania Mach, who were the previous prisoners, made rallies in every city and incited the people against the Jews, promising them their properties and their businesses and everything possible. This encouraged the population, especially the youth, to get organized in so-called National Guards, Linke National Guards, and their main objective was anti-Semitism. By the Germans winning the war so quickly against Germany, this was even more encouraged. The plans how to carry out the steps against the Jews and how to persecute the Jews must have come from Germany because they were extremely well prepared and organized. One of the first things was they insisted in every city should be a so-called Judenrat consisting of Jews, of Jewish leaders of the community, who were obliged to register every Jew in the city. Bardiev was a city of the population of about 10,000, and about 5,000 of them were Jews. They were surrounding villages and suburbs of a population of about 40,000, and in every village were a few Jewish families, some of them up to 100 and 200 families. Since the steps against the Jews were so organized and slow, step by step, that one would not imagine to what that eventually can lead. They threatened those members of Judenrat that they must do everything exactly as they asked them, otherwise they would be punished and jailed. Every Jew had to carry identification card, the picture authorized by the local officers. After this, they started to register Jewish property, like real estate, businesses, and bank accounts. In between, they gave out curfews for Jews to after 6 o'clock. A Jew was not permitted to go out to the street. Jews had to wear stars, yellow stars, as identification. First bands, armbands, and later on made stars of a certain size, and a Jew could be stopped in the street, checked by a policeman or by the National Guard, Linker Guard, if it's sewn on properly, if in the proper place, and if it has the proper size. If not, he could be jailed for that. A Jew was prohibited to speak Yiddish in the street or any other language except Slovak. The radios, whoever owned one, were sealed, so that only local or German stations could be heard. No foreign Western station was permitted a Jew to listen in. Traveling was restricted. One had to get a special permit to leave town only for a certain time. Orders were given to give up all the better clothing, especially fur, ladies' and men's fur coats. All jewelry had to be given up and delivered to certain stations until a certain time, and all this under the threat of big fines and imprisonment. Properties like houses which were occupied by Jews, mainly on the square, the main streets, the Jewish inhabitants were not permitted to occupy the parts facing the street. Stores, Jewish storekeepers and owners, which were some of them for generations, they had to take in non-Jewish partners. That was the so-called process of arisieren, without any investment or any knowledge about the business, became the bigger half shareholder. Bank accounts, business, savings, private, were all closed and confiscated. Your life insurances were confiscated. Meanwhile, in the neighboring Poland, which lost the war and was occupied by the Germans in less than 4 weeks, events against the Jews unfortunately took a turn for the worse. We must remember that in Poland lived the majority of European Jewry, about 3 million. All anti-Jewish laws were immediately after the occupation implemented, and very forcefully, and carried out. Killings, beatings, confiscations carried out daily. Since Bardiev was a city near the border, we had these first-hand reports direct from hundreds of immigrants who escaped from Poland under the most difficult circumstance, being shot at from both sides of the border, and while trying to cross over. When they arrived to our town, we tried to help them to hide. Those who wanted to continue, we tried to help them with identification cards and traveling permits. Traveling permits. Some of them went to Hungary. Many of younger people tried to get to that time Palestine. News about concentration of the Jewish population into ghettos and specially prepared so-called labor camps came through daily. These news had an effect on our Jewish population. Many started to run away to neighboring Hungary. Many tried performa to convert to Christian religion with hope that in case something similar as important comes, that might help them. In Slovakia, after this, events against the Jews took on a much faster pace. Daily laws, anti-Jewish laws, stripped Jews of every right, of every possession. Then, under the leadership of Dr. Tiso, the president, the laws of evacuating the Jews to labor camps to Poland and Germany were prepared. As mentioned before, Slovakia was a friendly nation to the Germans, and as I recall, the talk was that if the government, local government, would have liked to keep the Jews in the country or make certain labor camps in the country, they would have not objected. The opposite was true, though. The government under Tiso offered Germany 50 Reichsmark for every Jew that they took away into concentration camps. The process of transporting the Jews out of the country started in 1942 in spring under the most inhumane conditions, with the excuse that they are sending these people to labor camps only. They started first with young people, boys and girls. In Berdyaev, that did not take place at the same time. With the help of some medical doctors in official capacity, for payments of big monies, so-called typhus epidemic was organized. The whole city, Jews and non-Jews, had to be inoculated against typhus. The Nazis who carried out those transports, not carrying out the epidemic to other cities, temporarily stopped the transports from Berdyaev. But unfortunately not for too long. After a few weeks, they realized that it was an organized thing, and they started to take transport also from Bardiof. I recall on Pesach, the first transport of youth was supposed to be started. As a revenge for being belated, they took wherever they did not find youngsters at home, they took their parents instead. I recall when they walked in to our house, and looking, since they had the register of every Jewish person in the city, they looked for my sisters, which were hidden in hiding places, and they did not find them. They walked away while being at the door. While being at the door, one young local Nazi turned back and said, "You have a daughter over 15. Where is she?" The father answered, "She's not home." Myself and other members of the family, young ones, over 15, were hiding on the roofs, chimneys, basements, and similar places. So we could hear when they came and when they left, and they took my mother instead. So they wanted to take my father instead my sister, and then they said, "No, she's for a girl. We have to take a mother." They took my mother to a camp in the city where they concentrated the Jews, where she was supposed to be transported, and my mother managed to escape and come back home, and we got doctors for her, and they gave her medical treatment and certificates that she is not able to leave the bed. The gendarmes, which was the federal police, shortly came after her, and finding her in bed and seeing the medical certificates and pushing them a few hundred crowns into their pockets, left her at home. That day, many hundreds of young people and one parent of a family, a mother or a father, were taken away and families broken up. They were put into freight cars, into the trains, with hardly any food or no food at all, without any hygienic provisions, and worse than cattle, taken away out of the country. The Slovaks, being a young new country and having kicked out the Czechs who creating of the country occupied most intellectual positions like teachers in public schools, bankers, engineers, and most of the officers, public officers, city, state, and government, realized that by sending away all the Jews at once, the Jews who were, many of them were the professionals like medical doctors, dentists, and other for the economy important personnel, started to give out special so-called permits under the title of as economic important Jew. In case transports of Jews will be carried out, those Jews should not be taken. Shortly after that, large-scale transportation of Jews started. At this time, whole families, old, young, sick people, infants, pregnant women, hundreds of such families were taken away. The Nazi government announced that these people are taken somewhere for work and for humanitarian reasons. They don't want to break up families. From the local city government, the orders were given a day before that all those Jews who don't have the exception papers of economic important Jews should be ready in the morning and will be permitted to take along only as much as they can carry in their hands and on their back. Everything else has simply to be left behind. In the morning, even before the local Nazis came to pick up those families, they were already waiting outside in front of their houses. It is hard to comprehend that no resistance from anybody or anywhere took place, or retaliation or any retaliation. All the people lived there for generations, and their properties belonging to them accumulated for generations. And now leave everything behind and not even knowing where they are going. This was perhaps the biggest tragedy and punishment that God took away from these people the choice of free thinking and action, and instead went as sheep to the slaughterhouse. To carry out those big transportations, there came to our town special German troopers who brought along with them a group of German-speaking Jews who helped them to carry out their orders together with the local Nazi guard. All the Jewish families were collected into public places like schools, movie place, for most of the day, and the evening taken as in previous transport into freight trains under the most inhuman conditions and taken away. Since not too much belonging could be taken along, whoever had some money, jewelry, foreign currency, which did not need too much space, usually took it along in those packages. As we were informed, very shortly after takeoff, all these belongings were taken away from them. Very short time after these transports, reports started to come back to underground or to some individual escapees with the truth that these labor camps and places where these people were taken to were not simple labor camps but death camps. The reports not only reached the Jewish population, but also the government was informed about it. As I recall, connections were made to the Vatican, and big amounts of money, information was sent to underground, to the Vatican, to inform him about all these things. And asked for help. Instead, since the government, the head of the government, the president, Dr. Tiso, was a Catholic priest, there was some hope that by the intervention of the Vatican from Rome, some milder approach would be taken. Unfortunately, all this didn't help. The opposite was the truth. Some messages came. The Vatican asked the government that converts should be treated with consideration, which was interpreted that others should not have any consideration to be saved. The converts, for real or pro forma to Christianity, also received identification cards and papers to be accepted from those transports, as the same as the economical important Jews. After these big transports, the local government through the police and Nazi guards carried out sudden searches, so-called razzias, into the Jewish houses of the families that were left behind, in order to find illegal Jews, like immigrants from Poland, and hiding Jews from other cities. When they found some of these, they took them away, and also the families in whose houses they were found. Besides that the government, besides that, the government struck from their lists every few weeks or months a few names of the exceptions of the economically important Jews, and without any notice were suddenly taken away. After having the reports from the camps and seeing the exceptions papers are not to be trusted, some people decided to hide out under all kinds of forms. Dark basements with messed walls fenced up. Others managed to get identification cards as alias and to go to other cities where they were not known, or to villages hiding at farmers for big money. Others, even still having the exception papers, try to send their families to neighboring Hungary under the most difficult circumstance, through special agent who made big business from that. In Hungary, transfers of Jews didn't take place until 1944 in May. But anybody letting in a foreign Jew was threatened with big fines and punishment. Therefore, they had to live there also in hiding or under false Christian names. As an example, I would like to describe only one of many cases of one family where the head of the family still had exceptional papers, but his wife being a crippled woman with a few small children and an old mother not being able to walk through the border, had arranged to be smuggled to Hungary in a steam locomotive in a box built under the coal storage. Many such unbelievable things took place, and it is simply hard to describe them. This type of life went on while the war was raging in the West and the East. In spring 1944, when the Germans started to retreat from Russia, orders came that the few Jewish families who were left must be transferred to other cities towards the west. My father, being in the dental profession, and others similar in medical and dental profession, whom they needed very badly, were offered an extension of 3 months. My father, not trusting them, decided not to take it and went to Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia, and through the dental guild had arranged to be transferred to a little village in West Slovakia where they never had a dentist and asked for one. We also arranged the same for our colleagues in our city who were interested in that. Having had the federal okay from Bratislava for the transfer, the local authorities gave us permits to leave the city and to take along all belongings and all our dental equipment. We went to a little village named Rasice in the middle west of Slovakia. The good part was that the people in the village were never in contact with Jews, since there were never any living there. And all they knew about Jews was was theoretically what they heard from the propaganda in the papers and radio, so that many of them really pictured a Jew as a devil with two horns. But seeing in fact that it is not so, and getting professional services from us, they treated us quite nicely. In the nearby cities, the population was rather dangerous, since there were so-called Volksdeutsche, the minority nationals, and they worshipped the Führer and everything that was German. We got there in the month of May 1944, at which time they started the transporting of Jews out also from Hungary with big speed and cruelty. The retreat of the Germans came on very strong through the pressure from the Russians. What meant that additional danger for a Jew. After 3 months, all kinds of movements started to come up and be organized in that area, like partisans, fighters to fight the Germans from hiding places, the Slovak army deserters, some Russians came in, Czechs. They got together and they started the well-known uprising in about August 1944. With a central command in the city of Banska Bystrica, which was completely under their control. Bombing came also from the Americans. We were just in the middle of it and decided to leave the village and all our belongings and run towards the area that was occupied by the uprising army in and around Banska Bystrica. There was no more transportation possibilities, since everything was taken over by the army retreating and still the Nazi Guards army from the Slovaks. So we went by foot day and night under the most difficult circumstances and obstacles. I must mention that while passing the villages of the Volksdeutsche in the hottest weather, they refused to give a Jew even a drink of water. over. At last we reached Banska Bystrica. We were happy to get some shelter and some food by rationing and have some feeling of freedom. We joined in digging trenches and tried to help one another because the big influx of the still existing Jews from all sides. All this lasted about 6 weeks when the uprising was crashed by the retreating Germans. Everybody ran, especially Jews. Where to, we didn't know. There came an announcement that the last train is leaving Banska Bystrica. We got on this train, not into it because it was filled, only hanging on outside and on the roof of the cars. Within a short while, we got to a stop which was called Stare Hory, and that was the end of that train journey. Night fell in and rain started to pour. We had no choice, only lay on the ground in mud through the whole night. The houses of the village were occupied with soldiers who retreated from the crashed uprising, and they wouldn't let us in. They solved their problem much easier by changing into civil clothes and returning to their homes, or joining in armed partisan groups into the forests. But for a Jew, there was no possibility of survival in the natural way at that moment. Being surrounded by enemies. I would like to interject here in description of the area, having lived there through there a whole winter. Looking at the map, one can see there was only one country road leaving vertically to the north to a city named Ružomberok. No train or public transportation. From both sides of the road, rocky hills and forests. There were no fields or farms in the area. Therefore, the people didn't have any of their own produce and had to buy themselves everything, and went to work to the cities or worked in the forests, cutting wood. Also, as before mentioned, here there were no Jews living here, and villages had no direct contact with a Jew ever, only what they heard on the radio or read in the papers. After the dark night, in the morning, we let ourselves go into the forest, since staying on the road meant certain death. While struggling into the rocky hills, through the rocky hills into the forest, constant bombing and shelling from the Germans went on. Many ended their life journey there being hit by the bombs. In the forest, we got with many others into a small hunter's hut. Snow and rain came down constantly. We were very weak already, and it was hard, and no food left. It was hard even to make a fire to be able to dry off the soaked clothing on us, wet soaked clothing on us. Miraculously, some Gentiles from the villages showed up. We got hold of them, of one with the name Otto, and begged him to help us. We offered him money, some in foreign currency like dollars and gold that we had hidden with us. Down the village, and the road was already occupied by the Germans and controlled, full control of them, by them. Besides the money that the men were interested to get from us, he had also mercy, seeing what situation we are, and wanted to help us. He said that the Slovak army left behind proviant, means food, which the villagers took and must get rid of it as soon as possible, because the Germans, the retreating Germans, would take it all away from them. But in order to help us, he said we must cross over to the other side of the road into the hills and forests, which is nearer to his home, and there, from time to time, he would be able to bring us some food. Since we had no choice only to die here from starvation, we had to take the chance to cross the dangerous road which was steadily patrolled by the German army. Luckily, we managed to cross over into the other side of the hills where he pointed to us, and there on a rocky area constructed from trees, from half trees, a roof over our head, not to be covered by snow and rain. And as he promised, that Otto promised, he started to bring up some food, mainly cereal, which he grabbed a whole sack of it from the army, the leftover, and rice, which was our main nourishment during a whole winter, something that we didn't see for many years before. We got used to that wildlife in the forests, cutting wood during the day to make fire, not to freeze, getting into shelter under the roof that we created overnight. We envied the animals that walked around there, how much better they have it than us. But it seems that some other villagers, knowing that this Otto is helping some Jews in the forest and probably making some money, were jealous of him and reported us to the Germans who occupied the village. One day, a villager and a German SS surprised us in the hills with their guns and grenade in their hand. Made us all line up, their hands up, searched our pockets, our clothing, and took away everything that we still had, what was mainly money, some gold, and all our watches. And they threatened us to shoot us. Why they didn't do that is only God himself knows. Simply miraculous escape. They took everything that they found and left. In these forests, as mentioned before, they lived also many partisans with they had weapons, and that SS man on the way down to the village was shot by a partisan. They took away from him the robbery that he took from us, and returned even some of the belongings to us. Being frightened, scared from that happening, we mentioned to our contact, Otto, if he could help us to get us somewhere else from there. He said that his parents, who are old-timers, know about some cave high up in the mountains where he could take us, but he would not bring us any food there. We had no choice only to stay here, since going up there meant again dying from starvation. And so time went on until May 1945, or actually end of April 1945, when the battle came very near to our area. The man Otto came to tell us that the situation is very bad even for the villagers. They gathered all the villagers into the church and school because they were afraid of the partisans, since there was a rumor let out that there are the 10,000s of them in the fathers, both sides of the fathers. They did not dare to go into the fathers, therefore they were the partisans once in a while let them know that they are there by giving them obstacles on the road, the only road existing there, by letting down many trees to the road, and stopping their retreat, because they needed every possible road to escape. So, as mentioned before, they took all the villagers into the schools and threatened them to be shot if they will hinder their retreat. At that time, that Otto came up and asked us if we want to go to that cave to be a little safer. So we agreed. We took along a little cereal to preserve ourselves, and a whole night on all four we climbed through water and snow into the top of the mountain, where there was a cave where we could hide. As I mentioned, one cannot count up all the details that took place during such a long, hard winter. But many, many miracles happened. One of them right in that cave, which was probably still frozen, in front of it, we tried to cut some wood, to chop it up in order to make some fire, not to freeze. While standing there, a big rock from the hill came down, and just miraculously he escaped it. Being there in that cave for about 2 weeks, the children were sent, the youngsters were sent down, lower down to the forest to make contact with the villagers to get some food. It was on May the 7th, 1945, when the Russians broke through to the village and pushed out the Germans. With them were coming the Romanians, at this time fighting already on the Russian side, because before they were fighting with the Nazis against Russia. The mother of our man, Otto, knew Romanian and found out from the Romanian soldiers that they are going to search the forest, and anybody who is found will be shot. So in the afternoon, around 2 o'clock, that Otto came up to us, to the cave, and told us that he advised us to go down to the village to escape the danger of being shot. We listened to him and went down to the village and hid on the roof of their house. Through the little window, we spotted a car with a man whom we knew passing by. My father and myself ran out to get hold of him, to find out what's doing in the world, since we were completely cut off and didn't know what's going on. Not having had enough from the Germans, of course we looked very torn and worn, unshaved. Being on the road, standing on the road, the Russian Marines arrived, young, drunk, they were drunk, wild, and they took out their guns and stopped us and started to scream, "Germansky Spioni." It means German spies. And ordered our hands up and made us walk. We were sure that this is the end. Fortunately, they took us to the Russian command, where there were elder officers to whom we explained that we were Jews, we were hiding in the forest for many months, and they let us free. Turning back to their house, we tried the first possibility to get away from there to the city of Banska Bystrica, which was occupied by the Russians and Czechoslovaks already. We made contact with a Romanian army officer. They liked very much to do business, and they were going towards the east. They took us along all the way to a town in Bardiof, and that's where it ended, and we felt that we were liberated. Of course, even though we got back within 24 hours our house and permitted to carry out our practice, we could not make peace with our staying there, since most of our brothers and sisters were not there anymore, and to stay with people who did that to our brethren and sisters. Immediately we decided and made plans to leave the country. The first consideration at that time still Palestine, since Israel was not existing yet, but it was very hard to get certificates for a larger family. To go to Palestine. So, since we had many relatives in the United States, and they wanted us very much to come here, so we agreed onto that and left to the United States. My parents never gave up their wish and desire to get to our homeland, Israel. Unfortunately, they passed away in this country, and we took them there to their eternal rest.
To what political and or social organization did you belong prior to the war and during the ghetto period?
None.
To what underground organization did you belong? What made you join?
None.
What were your activities as a member of the organization until the Ghetto Rebellion? What was your status?
None.
Please recount names and personal details of members of your groups, including names of commanders and members whom you did not know personally.
None.
What were the contacts of your group with other Jewish groups in the ghetto?
None.
What were the contacts with the Aryan side?
As already mentioned in my story.
What were the weapons you used?
None.
Where did the arms come from?
None.
Where did the money come from?
As mentioned in the story, we had our own money saved up and hidden.
How did you define Jewish traders? And what did you do to them?
Unfortunately, they were Jewish traders. And because of them, many lives were destroyed. But nothing had to be done to them because they punished themselves those in whose employ they were did to them what they did to others, and the end was.
Were there arguments between those who wanted to fight in the ghetto and those who wanted to join partisans in the forest? What was your view then?
Didn't come in consideration by us.
Was there political argument within your organization, in your group? What were your views then?
None. As I mentioned before, we could not be organized. There was no organization.
Did the members of your group and did you yourself believe then in any of the following? If we fight, we have chances of survival. B. We have no chances of survival. C. We fight to take revenge. D. We fight for the honor of the Jewish people. E. We fight so people will not say that we went like sheep to be slaughtered. F. We fight because we have nothing to lose.
As mentioned in my story, unfortunately, the Jews did go like sheep to the slaughterhouse to be slaughtered. Fighting might have helped, but there was nobody to fight or to think about it, and there were also no possibilities to do it, as mentioned in the story.
What happened to your family? When did you leave it?
My family was fortunately one of many to be miraculously saved.
Please give any details you remember of the organizational structure of the underground before the fighting, during the fighting, number of fighters, size of groups, methods of communication, food supply.
There was no such organization in our area.
Relate in detail your own story during the fighting.
None.
If you escaped, how did you do it? Who helped you?
Details mentioned in the story.
If you were caught by the Germans, how were you caught? What happened to you after that until you came to a camp?
Was caught by Germans once in the forest, as mentioned in the story. Did not get to any concentration camp.
How did you get to the forest?
Details mentioned in the story.
Were you a member of a predominantly non-Jewish group? If so, what was its name? Who were the commanders? Where did it fight?
No.
If you joined a predominantly non-Jewish group, how were you received? Tell us the name of the unit, its size, names of commanders, where it fought.
No.
Tell us in chronological sequence your experiences, mentioning the details contained in the following questions regarding each of the units in which you fought. Relations between commanders and men in each unit you fought.
None.
Relations between Jews and non-Jews. Was there animosity? Quote examples as you tell your story. Relations between the surrounding population and Jewish partisans.
None.
Armed actions, especially those in which you yourself participated.
None.
Relations with family groups or individual unarmed Jews hiding in the forest. If you yourself belong to such a group, tell us its history, relating to it all the relevant questions in this questionnaire. Did the fighting units protect the family groups or not? What was the attitude of the non-Jewish commanders and men to the family groups?
The history of the hiding in the forest already told in my story. The fighting units in the forest did not protect us directly. attitude of the non-Jewish commanders and groups to the families, to the Jewish families, was completely not caring what's happening to us.
Did your unit do anything to bring Jews into the forest?
We didn't belong to any.
Were people, including yourself, received in the unit if they were unarmed to start with?
No,
Where did you get arms?
we didn't.
Where and how did you obtain food?
As mentioned in the story.
In which ghetto did you join the resistance group? Were you a member of an organized group, or did you join as an individual? Describe the group you belong to, numbers, personalities, activities in the ghetto.
As mentioned in my story, we did not join any resistance group. There were not any in our area. And there was no ghetto in our town.
Describe the steps leading up to armed resistance in your group. Discussions, education, etc. At what point did the group decide on armed resistance? Did the decision come before or after the actions?
There was none, never.
Who were the leading personalities in the resistance? What do you know of their backgrounds and later fate? Did any survive? Where are they now?
None.
Were there any tensions within your group, between your group and other groups? What were the reasons? Now, if at all, were they resolved? Were ideological considerations, Zionists, Bundists, communists important?
No.
What was the attitude of the Judenrat to the resistance?
Since there was no resistance in our town, there was no attitude of the Judenrat.
What was the attitude of the ghetto population to the resistance?
As mentioned before, there was no ghetto.
Were there religious people or rabbis among the resistance people? If so, can you tell us details?
As I was informed, there were some religious people and even rabbis among the resistance people, but I would not know any details.
Was there a discussion as to leaving the ghetto or fighting within it? What were the arguments and how were they resolved?
As mentioned before, there was no ghetto.
Where and how did you get arms?
We didn't.
What, if any, were your contacts with the non-Jewish underground outside? Who helped you, who did not? At what points of time did such contacts take place?
As mentioned in the story.
Were there any emissaries from one ghetto to another that you know about or can tell us anything about?
No.
Tell us, please, the story of the end of the resistance group in the ghetto.
I wasn't in any.